we can see the forest for the trees. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. Welcome to Lights On after, my God, what a week. What a week of unfortunate political violence that we have never advocated. So we don't have to start acting like we have to be defensive about this, because the amount of political violence that is generated on the right is exponentially higher than anyone on the left has ever generated. But this movement, this pro-democracy, true movement to save our country and our Constitution has never advocated for that. And we will not be gaslit into thinking that we have to defend ourselves from that posture as Trump comes out and tries to blame this on radical leftists when we are just now learning the details of the shooter, who appears to have indications of connections to others in the alt-right space. This appears to be more of a conflict within the right from what we know so far. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, but I'm very excited to have with me today a constitutional scholar to bring our attention back where it should be on the blatant attempted overthrow of American democracy. Just before this murder took place this week, the night before, we were all watching these brave women go into a restaurant in Washington, D.C. and shout out, "Free D.C., free Palestine. Trump is the Hitler of our time," confronting him face to face on what he is attempting to do to this country and the world, terrorizing the world, really, with his unconstitutional, lawless action, the serial con artist, this felon, this sexual predator. This week was, of course, the revelation of the Jeffrey Epstein birthday book that the House Oversight Committee revealed. I'm going to touch on that in a minute as well. But I just want to kind of start with where we are in this Charlie Kirk fallout. I was kind of just thinking about this last night and how truly disturbing this is to all of us. First of all, to have witnessed a brutal murder like that, and then to be so gaslit by the forces that have been stirring up so much consternation, so much violence. I saw this meme that really kind of captures a lot of the missed attention that we didn't pay to all of the violence coming from the right. Vance Bolter was a MAGA follower who killed Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, also their dog, their precious golden retriever, and also shot State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. Cody Balmer, just back in April, attempted to assassinate Governor Joshua Shapiro. Solomon Pena orchestrated a series of shootings targeting several Democrats from December of 2022 to January 2023. Den Hollander is the one who murdered Judge Esther Salas's son Daniel and also planned to attack Justice Sonia Sotomayor. There were 13 MAGA members convicted of planning to kidnap and murder Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Remember way back in Trump's first administration, Cesar Sayoc, he was the MAGA guy who sent pipe bombs to Obama, Biden, and other prominent Democrats in October of 2018. There was James Fields Jr., the MAGA white supremacist who ran over Heather Heyer at that white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So just the notion that we would be gaslit by any of this is really sickening. And I was thinking about the amount of attention that has been spent on Charlie Kirk, who, of course, did not deserve to die. Nobody deserves to die. Political violence is obviously never the answer. But Charlie Kirk said himself on gun violence, and I'm sure you've heard this quote this week, "I think it's worth it to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That's a prudent deal. It is rational." Those are the words of Charlie Kirk, not my words, not, I don't think, anybody's words on this side of the movement. But I was just thinking about the amount of attention and pearl clutching about this particular man's death, and some of the names and people who have not been given nearly enough attention when they have passed from this earth, having never spouted the kind of division and uh, xenophobia or misogyny or any level of just false Christianity that somebody like Charlie Kirk did. And I have to, of course, start with Melissa Hortman. And I just read to you that her beloved golden retriever was killed in that attack on her and her husband as well. And I just wanted to play this clip because this was really an extraordinary family, such a selfless family that gave their lives to actually training service dogs and rescuing animals, which is something that is very, very close to my heart. So I'm going to play this week because I want to put some attention where I don't think nearly enough light has been shown on the family of Melissa Hortman. Here is a service dog that they trained.
So gentle.
Minnie went through 2.5 years of training at Helping Paws, working directly with the Hortman family who volunteered to train her. It started as a high school service project for their daughter, but when she left for college, Mark Hortman finished the training.
Their love for helping others, doing something above themselves, is just living on every day with the gift that I got from their family.
A few years later, Representative Melissa Hortman wanted to train a service dog too.
She left the politics when she walked into the training facility, and she was just Melissa Hortman training Gilbert the dog.
Gilbert never graduated from training school, but went on to be a beloved pet of the Hortman family. Gilbert was shot and killed on Saturday, too.
Yeah, just evil. I mean, you talk about evil, to kill a husband and wife and their dog. There is no greater level of human depravity than to attack the innocent like that. So I really just want to shine a light on Melissa Hortman and her husband and their precious golden retriever, and anyone across the political spectrum who has been a victim of this environment that has been stoked by the right. This is not what anybody in the pro-democracy space with a legitimate platform has ever for 1 second been advocating. There are also some other deaths. I was just thinking about the gross amount of attention spent on one individual this week and how it has been distracting us from so many things going on in the world, one of which is the massive killing in Gaza. Today, 50 people, today alone, Friday, 50 people were killed in Gaza City as the IDF attempts to purge these people from their homeland with no place to go as they starve them to death. Here's a name you rarely ever hear names of the people killed in Gaza because there are just so many of them. This is 1.5-year-old Palestinian Ayman Muhammad Abd al-Ghaffar. He died this week from severe malnutrition and oxygen deprivation. This is his family clutching his deceased body in Khan Yunis on Tuesday. I was also just thinking about all of the doctors. I talked about journalists in the past, all of the journalists that have been killed in Gaza. Here's just a few of the doctors who have been killed, the healthcare workers trying to save other people's lives. A few of those names: Abdullah Hamad, Hussam al-Lulu, Fadi al-Wadiya. These are just a few of the names of people whose lives should be celebrated, who we should be shining a light on, who have perished without any kind of worldwide attention to their deaths when they were actually doing so much to help this world. So many people and names that we should be paying attention to other than this one name, unfortunate as it is, that perished this week. And of course, I mentioned we're being subject to so much gaslighting about who was responsible for this, and who knows what kind of predicate they will use from this incident, Donald Trump and his lawless, illegal administration, to enact more illegal restrictions on Americans, to use it as a pretense for another illegal power grab. This is like the authoritarian playbook 101. But we're already getting indications that this, as I mentioned, was a conflict within the alt-right, not from an external motivator, not from the left. And I had some, you can look at examples about this conflict just from people like Laura Loomer. This is just not very long ago, her lashing out about Charlie Kirk and him flip-flopping on Donald Trump and not being sufficiently loyal to him. There's also the very known feud between Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes, white supremacist Nick Fuentes. And there apparently have been engravings found on his bullet casings that have the word groypers. Apparently, some people don't know what groypers means. I sure as hell didn't know what it means, but apparently it is a reference to an alt-right group that was very popular within Nick Fuentes' audience. So more and more indication that this is absolutely not something that was instigated by the left at all. Notwithstanding that, Trump, of course, came out this morning on Fox and Friends, and when asked if this was an opportunity for loyalty, he said, no, it's the vicious and horrible radicals on the left of U.S. politics that are the sole problem. So we will continue to be gaslit by this serial con artist, this man who has been lying his entire life, who has been denying culpability his entire life, for to just use the narrative of this week to further crack down on a non-existent problem, much like he has in the migrant community, which is a lot about what we're going to talk about today. But I wanted to bring out what we were distracted from. It was really interesting segue that I thought of as I was making these connections about what we were all thinking about this week before this happened, the Epstein revelations, the unthinkable nature of predation that Donald Trump we know he was engaged with Jeffrey Epstein, and all of the dozens of credible accusations of sexual assault that have come out against him, not to mention being an adjudicated sex predator himself. And that's what we were focusing on earlier this week. And I thought back to the Katie Johnson lawsuit. Of course, the Katie Johnson lawsuit is the case of that once 12-year-old who alleged that she was sexually violated. Don't use that word here on YouTube. Try not to anyway, so we don't get censored, by Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. And she dropped her suit. This is literally in her court documents. She dropped her suit after she became the victim of physical threats by individuals who claimed to be Trump supporters. Imagine that. There's some political violence for you. A minor victim of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump had to drop that lawsuit, according to her court documents, because of threats of physical violence from Trump supporters or individuals who claim to be Trump supporters. So there's your connection. Let's, in honor of Katie Johnson, shine a light on what we were talking about. Or I'm sorry, she was 13 years old, not 12. You're correcting me in the notes, and I remember that. I'm actually thinking of another 12-year-old that we're going to talk about in future episodes. But what we were talking about this week before we all got distracted, there, of course, was the verification of that lewd note in the 50-year birthday book to Jeffrey Epstein from Donald Trump, where he has this typed out kind of theatrical voiceover exchange referencing enigmas and young people, the reference to age, the reference to their secrets, and just how much these two men have in common. Starting off, it says, "There must be more to life than having everything. Donald, yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey, nor will I, since I know what it is. Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes, we do. Come to think of it. Donald, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Donald, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." Signed, Donald Trump, with his signature very curiously placed on the groin area of that outline of a woman. This is what we found out on Tuesday night, along with this brand new page out of Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book that shows the picture of what appears to be a fake check, a joke, with Jeffrey Epstein and others holding up this check. Some people's faces blacked out, apparently some women. And it says written below, Jeffrey showing early talents with money and women sells, quote, fully depreciated, redacted, to Donald Trump for $22,500. Showed early people skills too, even though I handled the deal, I didn't get any of the money or the girl. Openly joking about selling women, not to mention, as they say so disgustingly, quote, fully depreciated women or girls or whatever is redacted there, if not a name itself, among a convicted sex trafficker and an adjudicated sexual predator with dozens of accusations from women, credible accusations from the women who could speak out, from the women who were not threatened into silence because of political violence. See the connections here? It's unbelievable. The gaslighting that they would have us lend our attention to if we are not alert. So this is what we're dealing with. This is an illegal president who has been illegal from the start. He is somebody who has tried to create the specter of rampant criminality in this country where it does not exist, to enact a hostile takeover of our country by sending troops into our streets, by allowing ICE to terrorize cities, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today with Professor Bernick, by so many lawless actions that warrant immediate impeachment and removal, which is, of course, what I have been focused on so exclusively on this show. If you're not subscribed already, please subscribe to the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. We're getting close to 200,000 subscribers. I have an announcement at the end of the show about what we're going to do when we get over that 200,000 mark, as well as some other very important announcements from the Removal Coalition. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming my friend back to the show, Associate Professor of Law at Northern Illinois University College of Law, Evan Bernick, also author of The Original Meaning of the 14th Amendment. Professor Bernick, welcome back to Lights On.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm just taking it all in as to the extent that I can. I can't possibly keep track of it all, but if we talk and if we listen to one another and we share information, maybe we can get some grasp on what's going on. And that's what I hope I can do with respect to what the Supreme Court is doing with the administration's actions.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'm so glad to have you back today because, like I said, we need to recenter our attention on what is happening with the hostile takeover of our democracy. And you have such an informed perspective on that. I know you wanted to talk to us today about the recent SCOTUS decision that undid the stay on these racially profiled ICE raids in Los Angeles. And this was written, this decision, by Kavanaugh with a dissent by Sotomayor. It's really kind of breathtaking, the circles that they go in to justify this racial profiling. But Professor Bernick, can you just kind of give us, I'm trying to get up the image here and it's popping up other ones as this software likes to do. Just give us your thoughts, or even if you want to just give us some background first on this case and where we are with this.
Sure. Well, the first thing I want to emphasize about this case is that the opinion that you just described, and I'm going to talk about a little bit, by Justice Kavanaugh, is not an opinion of the courts. This is one of a series of decisions that the Supreme Court has made preventing lower court orders that have held against the administration, have held that they can't dismantle USAID, that they can't dismantle the Department of Education, that they can't, in this case, engage in ICE raids that a lower court determined relied upon racial profiling. Without any public arguments, without any opinion that is signed by the justices and just explains the court's legal reasoning on what's known as the court's shadow docket or emergency dockets, and has left observers, including district judges, confused about just what the relevant law is. So this case emerged from a series of raids that were conducted in early June. The government launched immigration enforcement raids across Los Angeles, teams of armed and masked agents pulling up to car washes, tow yards, farms, and parks. Remember Stephen Miller complaining that agents weren't going into Home Depot. This is that. And they've seized individuals on site, often before asking questions, throwing them up against walls, threatening them with weapons, releasing them only after they showed some form of ID, or not releasing them at all and detaining them in terrible conditions in their facilities. And district court held that these raids were unconstitutional, that they violated the Fourth Amendment because they were not supported by individualized reasonable suspicion. So what the government said is that they were relying upon the fact that that the suspects spoke Spanish. They focused on car washes and bus stops, places where workers who don't need to have a lot of paperwork tend to gravitate. And that was essentially it. And the district court said, you can't do that. That's not consistent with the Fourth Amendment. Yeah. It's basically barely disguised racial profiling. Stop it. And the Supreme Court, while this case is making its way through the appeals process, the government asks for relief and says, allow us to do this while to do these raids while our case works its way through the appeals process. And the Supreme Court says, go ahead. And there's no opinion of the court explaining why. What you have is Justice Kavanaugh explaining why he personally thinks that the Supreme Court's intervention was correct, but we don't know whether he just speaks for himself, whether he speaks for a majority, or what's going on. And we're left in this place where a policy that very likely violates the Constitution is allowed to go into effect, and the Supreme Court as a body doesn't tell us why it is allowing this. Instead, we have only one voice who speaks, as far as we know, just for himself and doesn't speak particularly well. Gets a lot of very basic things wrong about Fourth Amendment law, about what kind of standing you have to bring a case into courts, and the basis on which the court can afford emergency relief.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary. I was reading from the Sotomayor dissent, and yeah, I'm just reading like Justice Kavanaugh, it said in concurrence, but there's no like guiding opinion, right? There's only his and the dissent.
Right. And so Justice Kavanaugh has actually gone to the press and said, I think that we should be explaining our shadow docket orders more. I don't think we should be just relying upon unsigned opinions or unsigned orders without explaining our legal reasoning, which great, but you just speaking individually and not very convincingly in support of the order isn't that much better. For all we know, Justice Kavanaugh speaks for Justice Kavanaugh, and frankly, I hope he only speaks for Justice Kavanaugh because the analysis that he performs is really, really weak on a number of levels.
Yeah. So I was reading from the dissent that Sotomayor wrote, and I'm just going to read from a portion of it. She says, quoting the standard, defendants may not rely solely on the factors below alone or in combination to form, quote, reasonable suspicion, which is the standard for apprehending someone, right? Yeah. To form reasonable suspicion for a detentive stop, except as permitted by law. Apparent race or ethnicity, these are things they cannot use. Apparent race or ethnicity, speaking Spanish or speaking English with an accent, presence at a particular location, i.e. bus stop, tow yard, day labor, or pickup site, or the type of work one does. The Fourth Amendment thus prohibits exactly what the government is attempting to do here: seize individuals based solely on a set of facts that describe a very large category of presumably innocent people. As the district court correctly held, the four factors are no more indicative of illegal presence in the country than of legal presence. The factors also in no way reflect the kind of individualized inquiry the Fourth Amendment demands. Allowing the seizure of any Latino speaking Spanish at a car wash in Los Angeles tramples the constitutional requirement that officers, quote, must have a particularized and objective basis for suspecting the particular person stopped of criminal activity. The government, joined by the concurrence, brushes aside this court's precedent with an appeal to probability, arguing that the, quote, high prevalence of undocumented immigrants in the Central District, quote, should enable agents to stop a relatively broad range of individuals. Without even a citation, the government asserts that 10% of the population in the Central District is unlawfully present. So it is inevitable and unremarkable that immigration officers would target any Latino person or any person speaking accented English or any person standing in a particular type of location or any person working a low-wage job in the greater LA area. Never mind that nearly 47% of the Central District's population identifies as Hispanic or Latino. Never mind that over 37% of the population of LA County speaks Spanish at home, and over 55% speak a language other than English. Of course, aggregate statistics cannot substitute for the individualized suspicion that the Fourth Amendment requires. I mean, we really have seen with these ICE raids all over the country, Evan, a blatant disregard of the Fourth Amendment, haven't we?
Absolutely. And Justice Sotomayor is right in everything she says. And one might even add a couple of things to that, which I'm going to do right now. Yeah. So the case that Justice Kavanaugh really relies upon for this idea that a parent ethnicity can factor into a determination that somebody can be reasonably suspected of a criminal offense is a case called United States v. Brigone-Ponce. And what Brigone-Ponce held was that immigration officials could not rely upon, quote, Mexican appearance alone in deciding to stop people. So the government lost that case. Brigone-Ponce's rights, the court held, had been violated. Towards the end of that opinion, the court says, we acknowledge that given now outdated demographics, Mexican appearance could play a role as a factor in a decision whether to stop someone, but it can't be sufficient by itself. So that line, that acknowledgement of it could be a relevant factor, it's just not enough, becomes, in Justice Kavanaugh's presentation, a holding, a rule that it's totally cool to rely upon demographic information and an ICE officer's determination of who looks Mexican in deciding whether to stop them, so long as you add, oh, they're at a place commonly frequented by undocumented workers, and oh, they're in California where there are a lot of undocumented workers. And what Justice Sotomayor points out is if that's the case, we don't have any individualized suspicion. Any number of people, anybody who speaks Spanish, looks Mexican, and
it's a ridiculous
is at these
standard
areas where undocumented workers apparently frequent, that's enough. We don't even have specific locations. And as she points out, the demographic information that Justice Kavanaugh recites is if it's just a fact. There's no citation to where it came from. Now, we know where it came from. It came from the Department of Justice's brief. The Department of Justice was relying upon a study that came out a couple of years ago that immigration lawyers tell me is probably more or less accurate. But the point is, we needed to do all of those steps to figure that out. And the point is that the court is just taking the government's word for what it's representing, even though there are ample reasons to doubt whether the government can be relied upon and what it represents about anything at all. See the assault rate on ICE officers that it's able to conjure up every month or so and say it's something like 600 or 700%, depending upon the needs of the administration.
Yeah, it's really outrageous. So where does this leave us right now procedurally with this case?
So where it leaves us right now is that these raids are going to continue, and the case
does
is
this
going
have
to
a
make its
bearing
way
on-
through the appellate process.
Does this have a bearing on cities other than Los Angeles right now?
Insofar as it shows that the Supreme Court is willing to intervene on behalf of the government, if you tell ICE to stop racially profiling, yes, it has those implications, because now ICE knows that if it works in California, it can work elsewhere, because the Supreme Court will intervene to enable it to work. And that's the most disturbing thing about this. Not just that it greenlit what happened in California, which was, you can see it in the opinion, the description of what Stephen Miller wanted to do. He says, get creative, turn this up to 11. Turning it up to 11 was not enough for the Supreme Court to balk. So why would they stop there? Why would they stop unless, I'm in the state of Illinois, you have a governor that's actually prepared to forcefully stand up and say that he is prepared to ensure that his citizens' constitutional rights are respected. And basically, if you're prepared to fight a bully, the bully will go elsewhere. I think that's the best that you can do in these circumstances, and sometimes it still won't work if they are really determined to do what they want to do, and they know that they've got a friendly Supreme Court.
Yeah, what is the mood on the ground in Illinois to Trump's threats to send in the National Guard and all kinds of his attacks on Chicago and going head to head with Pritzker? What's kind of the mood there?
Well, Trump backed down. There's no getting around that.
Yeah.
He said he was coming in. We saw the Apocalypse Now meme. He was going to bring in the National Guard. It was rumored that he was going to bring in the Texas National Guard or something, and none of that happened. And we're getting ICE raids. Now, ICE raids are bad. They are not something to be dismissed, but he wanted to turn things up to 11, and he didn't turn things up to 11. So I think that there is some amount of comfort that can be taken in that he was effectively made to back down, even if it's been recently reported he is now targeting Memphis. And there's no, it's not like people in Memphis are of less moral concern than people in Chicago. So you basically just got to keep fighting him on every front. JB is showing one way that you can make what he is doing less harmful, even if you can't eliminate the harm altogether.
Yeah, can we talk about for a minute? I mean, just, on this next threat, this threat to go into Memphis, which is a Democratic city in a red state, just this broader constitutionality or unconstitutionality of utilizing the National Guard in the way he has done, for instance, in DC to this day, or the way he attempted in Los Angeles.
Right. So DC is its own thing because of the unique circumstances of not being a state. When you mess with states, you have restrictions on the federal government, namely federalism, that assumes that law enforcement in general is left to states, and the use of federal military is totally not allowed. And effectively, what you have, if Trump federalizes the National Guard through a federal statute, is you have a federal military. Now, Trump can federalize the National Guard. There's a statute that provides for that. But in order to do anything with that National Guard on anything resembling the scale that he wants to do it, it's not sufficient to just rely upon the federalization statute. He probably needs to invoke the Insurrection Act, and he has refused to do that.
And this is what Posse Comitatus.
What reasons? Stephen Miller clearly wants him to do so. He's not doing it.
Right.
The problem is that without that, you don't have much legal authority to do much other than possibly protect federal buildings and personnel, and that's nothing resembling the scale of what he wants to do, which is just fight crime. If you want to fight crime with the National Guard, you're going to run up against the Posse Comitatus Act really quickly. And the Posse Comitatus Act, broadly, with a couple of exceptions that I just mentioned, prohibits the use of military officials to prohibit ordinary law enforcement.
Right.
So if he does what he says he's going to do, he's going beyond his statutory authority and he's violating the Constitution. The question is he actually going to do it? And who's going to tell him to stop? Given that you're looking at, if you're a federal judge, the possibility of eventually getting reversed and possibly insulted by a Supreme Court that tells you you've overstepped your constitutional authority, even if you haven't.
So a lot of this conversation, we started off on basically the alarming nature of these shadow docket and this decision coming out of the Supreme Court that completely disregards the Fourth Amendment. We know this is a Supreme Court that itself is so deeply corrupt and compromised. This is the same Supreme Court that issued the immunity decision. This is the same Supreme Court that overturned Roe. This is a Supreme Court that has basically shown itself to be a very complicit actor, as far as I'm concerned, in the sabotage of our Constitution, frankly. Now there are the courts, and there is Congress. And you and I, Evan, have had this conversation before, and I am so beyond, I have zero patience for the unwillingness of members of Congress to uphold their constitutional oath. It seems like, especially this summer, I'll be honest with you, as I'm engaged in my activity, I've formed a removal coalition to focus direct action and protest specifically on impeachment and removal. And it seems like while our community and the people and the protesters and the resistors are all so much on this page, the people in the media and in Congress, the more lawless things Trump and this regime do, the less they want to talk about impeachment, the less they want to talk about remedies. It's like, oh, let me commit 10 more impeachable acts. Well, impeachment's just, let's not even talk about impeachment until after the midterms. I think I had you on, gosh, was it March, Evan, near the State of the Union, when you were talking then about why members of Congress needed to use their impeachment powers? Is there any reason that you can justify as a constitutional scholar for not moving forward, even just through vocal support, if it's even a senator in the Democratic Party, not to mention what people in the House are able to do, just vocalizing the need for impeachment in the wake of blatant constitutional violations?
It certainly looked like there's party discipline going on. Hakeem Jeffries just has absolutely no interest in going down this route. Chuck Schumer has no interest in going down this route. And there's party discipline that is, it's not perfect. It never can be. And you have occasional members who will say occasionally inspiring things, but there are just a lot of people who are scared and don't know what to do other than just wait until effectively he does something that is just going to be so obviously out of bounds that they can suddenly snap to their constitutional duties and perform them. The thing is that he does that every week. It's never going to happen. And I don't know what I can do to inject a source of optimism into that. I think that Congress is effectively a dysfunctional institution, that we have a functionally inoperative Article 1. But that is a choice. It doesn't have to be this way. Just like the decision to, if you're a lower court judge, you can say, well, Justice Kavanaugh is the only one writing. He's only writing for himself, but I don't have any other opinion. I'm going to act as if that's the law. And if you act as if that's the law, then that's what it's going to be. This only happens if you make it happen. And so I think that there is a lot of taking for granted as fixed, as unchangeable, things that are totally changeable if human beings work together to change them. Our country has been through worse, a lot worse. We had a functionally inoperative 14th Amendment in half of the country. We had genocide of indigenous people that spanned generations. We had a segregated executive branch. You could just go on and on and on with how bad things have been. But ultimately, this is just a bunch of human beings, and human beings can do amazing things when they work together with a common vision that is inspiring, is meeting people where they are. And if they want to know what that kind of vision might look like, they might listen to the millions of people in the streets every week protesting against this regime and wondering where the hell their elected officials are.
Amen to that. I don't know if you've been following what we've been doing at all, Evan, but we've been organizing major protests. We have been taking people by the thousands into the halls of Congress, giving them the flip side of Trump's deadly insurrectionist army on January 6th, showing them what peacefully raiding Congress should look like.
Right, and and historically, the example here that I keep coming back to is the abolitionists. I mean, at the time, nobody liked the abolitionists except the abolitionists. They were very unpopular. They had, they would always be presenting these petitions, do something about slavery, please.
Yes.
And everybody was like, that's ridiculous. Even Lincoln early on was like, I'm not an abolitionist. I don't really support this. It doesn't seem that great to me. And then he leads an abolitionist army because things can change very quickly if movements are organized and a common vision is attached to, and people fight for it and aren't intimidated by bullies.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I literally brought up the issue of slavery in the context of fighting for impeachment in one of these chats that I'm in. And somebody told me it was a straw man argument. And I'm like, really? I don't think so. Yeah. Like, this is the same, like when I bring up the case of impeachment, it's literally just a matter of will. And what you're just saying, Evan, like just the notion that we have 10 million people in the street on a No King's Day, and those 10 million people cannot move the will of a mere, 17 people in the Senate or 20 and 5 in the House, mere mortals, that we don't have the power to do that. It's just, give me a break. Like, I refuse to concede that fight. Like, the impeachment is the constitutional means we have for removing a tyrant president. We have to use it. We cannot wait. Like, there's so many moments. You and I got to know each other on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. They blew through and blasted that opportunity to stop this entire madness before it started. And here is another opportunity with impeachment that may just slip through their hands, and all the midterms that they're banking everything on may not even happen, because God knows these people will do anything to stay in power.
Right. People are afraid of being isolated, of looking ridiculous, of being laughed at, of being called crazy, even though the craziest predictions that you could have ever come up with, and people have come up with them. Even the New York Times, before whatever the hell happens, said, here's what Trump has promised to do. And line by line, it is all the ridiculous things that he is now doing. Yeah. So what I would say to people who have that concern is, look, you are going to have to look a little bit ridiculous, because
and it's not ridiculous.
This is where I go to the example of the abolitionists. It's not that like everything is slavery, or I'm drawing a comparison to slavery. What I'm saying is that very vocal minorities, if they articulate compelling visions and work to achieve them across a variety of venues and contexts in conjunction with one another, can build movements that are large enough to shift democratic power. Even under a constitution that is a little bit insulated from direct popular democracy. You do what you can. The Republican Party emerged out of the abolitionist movement, an abolitionist movement that everybody hated and drove out of every state, that certainly wasn't marshaling millions of people in the streets. If they can do it, what the hell are we doing?
I know. So that's why I formed the Removal Coalition, because I'm like, this energy has to be focused and directed with a specific demand on our elected leaders. We have to focus all of this energy in that direction. If we did that, can you imagine, Evan, if the entire Democratic Party was unified right now for impeachment? Like, how the conversation would change in this country. And they think it makes them look like fools. We went into Congress, we went into Hakeem Jeffries' office, spoke to his legislative director, had 10 people standing outside the office, all saying, you are massively disconnected from the way the people feel. We think you look ridiculous by being weak and standing down in this moment. We're showing you what will give you any kind of credibility and any kind of popular support. I mean, these people are vastly unpopular right now. You would think that they would do something to get themselves the support that they need to win.
Yeah. And, we're offering you the opportunity to be constitutional heroes.
Yes.
You can be that. Isn't that attractive to you? So, the models here, people like Charles Sumner, people like Thaddeus Stevens. They looked ridiculous. Yeah, they were made fun of. Yeah, everybody said every nasty thing that you could possibly say. Yeah, they were denounced as demanding too much, of being too radical, whatever. They were able to get what they wanted to do done. Ultimately, the force of a moral argument and having actual organic popular power behind you rather than a bunch of old institutions and democratic choke points. I mean, one thing that just has to be said over and over again about MAGA is that it's never been a mass movement. It has always depended upon the most minoritarian, undemocratic aspects of our system, and threats of violence to get the weaponization of the fear of looking ridiculous in order to get anybody to bow down to them. There aren't many of them, but they're able to punch above their weight because people are afraid of them. And
it's like an illusion. It's a mass illusion, Evan, like that we have not. That's what I constantly talk about. This whole movement is just like, it's what we're living through right now is just this vast failure to recognize our own power. And we're basically buying into this illusion and this narrative that they have created for us.
Right. It's a mistake to underestimate them. They are very effective propagandists, but they do not have the people. They never will. They can only marshal the appearance of that and intimidate people who might otherwise speak out into silence. This is how fascist regimes work. They work by projecting power that they actually don't have, other people believing it, and then everybody just kind of going on with their lives and hoping it passes. And then it never does, until it does suddenly because somebody actually stood up to them. And then it collapses. And so, I don't want to romanticize JB too much, although I think he's doing a great job, but you kind of have in microcosm what it looks like. Just say from the very beginning, no, we're not negotiating with you. There's nothing to talk about. Don't come here. We don't want you.
Exactly.
If you come here and you break the law, we'll arrest you. And just that over and over again.
I love seeing the sanitation trucks lined up to block anybody from entering. That was the greatest image.
Right. People can come up with all sorts of creative ways once they decide to do something.
There's so many ways. I wanted to touch on one story before I let you go today, and that's the case of Ayman Soliman, who is the Cincinnati hospital chaplain, children's hospital chaplain, who came here on political asylum from Egypt, where he faced prosecution for his work as a journalist. On July 9th, he was abducted, I will just say, by ICE. His political asylum status stripped from him. He is sitting in a county jail run by a sheriff in Ohio right now, where they have a sign outside that reads "Illegal aliens here." This is a brutal, cruel detention of a man who is beloved, literally beloved in his community for what he has done for children, for what he has done for the faith community. They're pursuing him, and this is part of the broader attempt of this regime to characterize justice seekers or otherwise innocent people as terrorists or terrorist sympathizers. And they're using this law that references material support as a predicate for having revoked his status and keeping him in prison. They've suggested, because he was involved with an Islamic charity that provided support to the Muslim Brotherhood, that he has material support to Islamist militants, even though the Muslim Brotherhood is not even a U.S. designated terrorist organization. But this is one, Evan, of many cases of people being targeted, obviously, because they're Muslim, because they are they are not white Anglo-Saxon people living in our country. It is a very, just going along with where we started with the ICE raids, racially motivated, religious, ethnically motivated attack on a man who has absolutely no reason to be detained here, not to mention will probably be killed if he is sent back to Egypt.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say about that is that telling that story is the first step to building enough power to make this not happen.
Yeah.
Precisely because the statute in question, the material support statute, This is a terrible statute. It is incredibly broad. It gives a ton of discretion to the federal government. It was upheld against First Amendment challenges, but it shouldn't have been. And we are now seeing an administration that is determined to make it as abusive as it possibly can be, and possibly even going beyond the scope of an inherently abusive statute to make it do that. So the more that we talk about the degree to which that even under the very broad text of this statute, there are just certain predicates that are not met here. The fact that we are not dealing with an actually designated terrorist organization, or an organization that was found to have no ties by an Egyptian court, and emphasizing the degree to which he has been a pillar of his community is really going to be key to fighting this. Because I got to tell you, once we get into the system with this stuff, national security, super broad statutes, Supreme Court said it didn't violate the First Amendment. One of the things that I think this administration is really highlighting is just how important it is to get rid of bad laws before bad actors take over and make them as bad as they can possibly be.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said in the beginning about shining a light on this, how important that is, like what we have seen is the cases like Mahmoud Khalil, the cases like Albrego Garcia that we have relentlessly shown a light on, are the ones where the people, thank God, have gotten some modicum of justice under this authoritarianism. And so on that note, I want to tell everybody that Ayman Soliman has a court hearing, a trial on September 25th in Cleveland, Ohio at the B. Stokes Federal Courthouse building, 8 a.m., September 25th. If you are anywhere in the Cleveland area and can go there to show your support in person, that would be incredible. If you can post anything about Ayman Soliman in the time between now and then and demand justice for him, anything you can do to shine a light on his case will obviously, I think, be very effective in moving the needle towards justice. So Absolutely. Please do that. Evan, anything you want to leave us with before you go?
I will just say that that's what the abolitionists did during the Fugitive Slave Act prosecutions. They showed up in courts. They made their presence felt. They communicated that to judges who don't like to think of themselves as bad people. Yeah. That this was somebody who had been unjustly treated, and there are people who are prepared to support him. And you give somebody an opportunity to be a hero. Judges have have large egos. They have very high opinions of themselves. So show up, project, hey, you have an opportunity here to do the right thing, and you might be surprised at what can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I love putting it in that context instead of shaming everybody. Look, here's your gateway to heroism, folks. Here it is. Yeah. All right. Well, a pleasure as always to have you on Lights On. Please don't make us wait so long next time. Okay.
I'll do what I can. Thanks so much, Jessica. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. Always a pleasure. And just to leave you all with, I was thinking this whole week, and as Evan was speaking in this whole conversation and thinking about what we're doing, this quote that popped up from Martin Luther King this week, it says, "Those who love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those who love war." We must organize as effectively. We must be as focused and undeterred. We must learn how to come together. You know who I'm talking to. I'm talking to some of the people that I'm working with right now. You must put aside your differences and be aligned on a common goal and have a united front. We must learn to organize as effectively for peace and for justice as those who love evil and war and chaos. We can do this. We can do this. Let us do it. I just want to share, this is something I actually kind of wanted to put at the top, but I'm going to put it here at the end just to end you with clarity on this whole Kirk situation, because God knows we're going to continue to have so many misled narratives, of course, from the illegal Trump administration and all of their acolytes in the right-wing eco space. But I do believe that more and more information is coming out that this was a right-wing conflict, and somebody who was who was himself on the right, motivated against Charlie Kirk, maybe because he was not liberal enough, maybe because he was in this feud with Nick Fuentes, whatever it was, very unlikely that this was an attack from the left. And I want to give you some other examples from history of these kind of internecine conflicts. One is George Lincoln Rockwell. He was an American neo-Nazi who was assassinated in 1967 by a man named John Patler, who was an expelled member of his own party, the let's see what it is, the National Socialist White People's Party. So this was a disgruntled, expelled member of their own group. Some other examples from history are Malcolm X, who was assassinated by someone from the Nation of Islam. Lenin was shot by a socialist revolutionary. Many internecine conflicts throughout history, although they would like to shift blame to the other side. I mean, just think about this for a second. In what universe does creating Charlie Kirk or making Charlie Kirk a martyr help the left? I mean, that's one very kind of cynical zero-sum game motivation for never engaging in political violence. Not that we ever are advocating for it in the first place, but it doesn't, there's just no way that making a martyr out of somebody like Charlie Kirk would be something good for people on the left or what we are trying to accomplish. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So obviously we don't fall prey to these kinds of gaslit narratives. I'm going to share with you what's going on with the Removal Coalition. As I mentioned, we're coming up on 200,000 subscribers. Please subscribe if you have not yet. Please share this show. You know the show is a movement. You know that this is a very, very important platform for the actual remedies that we have to handle what is going on right now, and not just a platform to engage in rage or other, calling out clickbait kind of things. This is an actual movement. So I need your support. I need you to share Lights On. Once we get to 200,000 subscribers, which with your help will happen very soon, I'm going to start doing something called the Removal Coalition Report. A lot of you have asked me for kind of shorter episodes or more frequent episodes, and I do them as often as I can throughout the week, not just on Friday. But once we get over 200,000 subscribers, I'm going to start a Removal Coalition Report, which will be shorter live episodes throughout the week with members of the Removal Coalition, like Citizens Impeachment, like FLAIR, like 5051 Los Angeles, and the others around the country, like all of the incredible groups that are part of the Removal Coalition, a coalition that is growing by the weeks. And so that is something I'm really, really excited to bring you, also with people on the ground, like on the ground in DC, on the ground in LA, gonna bring you stories directly from them. So the incentive there for you to please share this and amplify this channel, the Jessica Denson YouTube channel. Share it with others. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Turn on your notifications. The Removal Coalition report is coming soon as we hit that 200,000 mark. Now, the other thing that I want to announce is what's been going on. I told you about it last week, which is this incredible march that is literally going on as we speak. This is the We Are America March, the We Are America March. People literally marching on foot 160 miles from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. to bring, by land or by sea, by land or by sea, that's crossing the Susquehanna River there in Maryland, separates Maryland and Delaware, the Constitution to Washington, D.C., to those members of Congress that seem to have completely forgotten their duty. Very major sacrifice these people are making. And we have a major event coming up 1 week from now. I'll be back in D.C. with Representative Al Green, Harry Dunn, and others. Let's see. The image doesn't want to come up on your screen. I'm trying to show you, and it doesn't want to pop up. But we will be back in Washington, D.C. next week for the culmination rally. There will be a giant United States Constitution there, the same one that we saw in Los Angeles in June at the No Kings event. There are going to be kids there. There's going to be myself, Harry Dunn, Representative Al Green, the leader of Free DC. I think we're working on some other speakers. And most importantly, we're going to recreate the energy of 9/2 in the halls of Congress by going to those representatives' offices directly and demanding that they uphold their oath to the Constitution via the impeachment clause, via acknowledging Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and this illegal insurrectionist presidency. We are demanding, people are demanding peacefully in that House that those members uphold their oath. So please, if you are in the area or if you can get to the area, join us in Washington, D.C. 1 week from today at 11 a.m. on the National Mall for the We Are America March. So everybody, thank you so much, as always, for joining me here on Lights On. If you want to support my work, which you know that I need now more than ever because of my ongoing legal battle against the Trump campaign that's been going on for 8 years, you can do that at thejessicadenson.com/donate, thejessicadenson.com/donate. Thank you so much for your support. I love you all. Have a wonderful weekend. And as always, let your light shine.